Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad you're here. I heard that Don Hall Sr. passed away this last Sunday, and it just brought back so many memories about my time working at Hallmark Cards. He was never the CEO while I was working there because I was there in the late 90s, early 2000s. But one of my friends, Martha, always made sure that I got to go with her to the 25-year club dinner. So, if you don't know, anniversaries and birthdays are a big deal at Hallmark Cards. In fact, when I hear people talk about not wanting to go to their job on their birthday, they want to take their birthday off. I am reminded of how different that place was when I worked there because you wanted to be at work on your birthday at Hallmark Cards, at least if you like to celebrate, because there would be cake, there'd be all these cards that you couldn't even possibly keep up with. And just people really making sure that your special day was actually that special. And, for anniversaries, you would get a gift. If, you got, 20 it got to 25 years, you could get either a Rolex or this fancy wooden bowl or this amazing crystal and china. When I had Khalid, I was not expecting this, but to my home came this beautiful um silver gift for my baby when I got married. Even though while there I had gotten married twice, each time they sent me a beautiful silver platter to commemorate my marriage. I mean, to me it was just a fantastic place to be if you valued being celebrated. And at the 25-year club dinners, I never worked there for 25 years, but anybody who had 25 years or more, there'd be this massive party. Think wedding reception for everybody there. You'd get a little gift. There'd be lots of fun and dancing, drinks. Um, of course, Don Hall Sr. would talk, but what stands out to me more than anything is that this man who was worth billions of dollars was the kindest, happiest, most joyful, most relatable person I had ever met in my entire life. And his wife Adele was always it was the same way too. Like if you paid attention, you'd look at her wrist and see that the she had one gold bracelet that she wore, and it was quite thick, and it had like charms on it. I think it was maybe for her grandchildren. I can't remember. But other than that, there was no way for you to really even tell that they were wealthy. And it taught me something. It really did, because I, of course, grew up in poverty, but just maybe 2 miles away from the Crown Center area, which the Hall family is responsible for creating. When I would go to the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, it was when I would walk there, it was during the height of the crack cocaine epidemic in Kansas City. So thinking late 80s, early 90s, I would take the 1 mile walk from my house, which is east of Truce, over to the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. And the entire front lawn is the Don Hall Senior Sculpture Garden, right? Like this man has a sculpture garden named after him. When I learned about who has the largest collection of African American art, it has been the Hall family. I remember when I was first introduced to the artist Kehinde Wiley. I walked into the main floor, it's the fourth floor of the Hallmark complex, and there on the wall was this massive, I don't even know how tall it was, 20 feet, 30 feet tall. This a black man standing there, just regally painted with all the beautiful floral that we know from Kehinde Wiley. And listen, people complain, employees complain, but it wasn't coming down. And you know why it wasn't coming down? Because of who Don Hall Sr. had raised his children to be. And when I was transitioning to empathy and being more clear about writing about empathy, the leader I wanted to write the foreword to my book was Don Hall Jr. And Don Hall Sr. is his dad. Uh, And to me, on the outside, they don't seem anything alike. Because Don Hall Sr. is like seems like the life of the party, right? Like the man was just he knew how to party. In fact, I think when I'd met him, he had gotten into a little trouble. It was all in the news, and he was just telling jokes about it. Like he didn't even. I mean, he was just chill, right? And but Don Hall Jr. I texted him and I said, "Hey Don, I am working on this project. I think you are one of the most empathetic leaders I've ever seen. In fact, when I left Hallmark Cards, I wanted a meeting with him, and he took the meeting. And I was not a corporate officer, I was not a senior leader. So, you know, he ain't got to take my meeting. Not only did he take my meeting, he gave me it was 30 minutes. He talked to me for 3 hours. I shared all the good, all the bad, all the ugly about what my experience had been like. Because I left a job I loved because of, one of my experiences with Mr. Surprise and Delight. You all might remember that story, me telling it before. And so when I text Don Jr., I was like, "Okay, I want you to write the forward because I think you're one of the most empathetic leaders I know. And I have written a draft for you so you can just approve it." And he was like, "No, send me the book, I'll read it, and then I'll write my own forward." And he did. And I think, while to most people that might like seem like nothing, but I think it's a testament to how Don Hall Sr. raised his family. And when you think about some of the most storied organizations in Kansas City, like the Civic Council, w the Minority Business Supplier Network, when you think about Kaleidoscope and Crown Center and what that whole thing has meant to our city, Don Hall Sr.'s hand is all over it. And I tell you, um, they didn't have to do that. They could be like many of the billionaires that we get to see today who are like, "Give me my money and I don't have to share it and I don't have to do anything for anyone else." If the Hall family is nothing, they are generous. I remember when a granddaughter of Don Hall Sr. was working in the HR department with me. Her name is Sarah. And we have the same Myers Briggs personality type. And we act like it. Like, how do you create children who are very normal in the way that they move and shake when not only are their parents on the billionaire list, their grandparents were on the billionaire list, and their great grandparents were on the billionaire list? Because, honey, I know that I don't show up in the most humble ways where I am. You know what I'm saying? And so it just, I know it creates a bias in me because when I was learning how I wanted to lead, I saw Don Hall Sr. put people first. If the company during his time, I don't think this was a thing, but during my time, it was a thing. Like 2008, when the bottom fell out of the economy, the Don Hall Sr. was critical for the family deciding that they were going to use their own money to make sure that we got raises and bonuses that year. Amazing humans, amazing humans. And today what we have are people who will bury their wives on their golf course so they don't have to pay taxes on it. And when I think about this election cycle, one thing that keeps coming up in my mind is, what does it look like to vote with empathy? I don't know how you can be married to an immigrant and then talk about immigrants as invaders and infesting and taking over and using this kind of information when you are married to an immigrant. It's a level of hypocrisy, right? I don't know how you can know that tax code works for you, even though I maintain that there's not a big difference between what you can do with $100 billion that you need another 100 billion in order to be able to do. You can do anything in this world with $100 billion. It like just when you think about that, people like Oprah don't even have 10 billion, and that there are folk who have 200 billion, and a former president saying, "I got to reduce taxes on someone with 200 billion." I think sometimes not I think, I know that sometimes our minds can't even make sense of how much a billion is. And I keep telling people, if I gave you $1 for every second you lived, you would have $1,000,000 by the time you were 11 days old. You would be well past your 40s if I gave you $1 every day, or every second, and till you got to $1,000,000,000. And this family, one time I saw Don Hall Jr. going to get his own car. I know people who won't go get their own car and they just got a couple few hundred million. Ain't gonna do it. You better go get my car. And talking to people crazy. The man has such a beautiful, sweet spirit, and I believe it's because of who his daddy is. And I think what one thing I was shocked by, he's being late. The ceremony, I mean the funeral, um, to observe his life is today at 3 o'clock at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church. I am not going to be able to make it, and I'm so upset about that because I just want to be in the space to just express my condolences because of what they have taught me about leadership. You know, um, putting people first, that it was not this idea when you care enough to send the very best. I have never seen quality standards anything like what I saw in that paper converting facility. I've been in food facilities where, at least for dogs, where people are not as particular about quality as they were in those Hallmark printing facilities. Like, this blue is a little bit different than this blue. You got to recycle all that. It can't go. In fact, even when I think of, I was thinking about my friend Rick Robeson this week, who was a storied environmentalist. I miss him so much. And the very first, was it called rooftop garden? The entire 8th floor, when you drive into the Hallmark corporate headquarters, there's a parking garage underneath that. All they put greenery there, not just for beautification, but to address stormwater runoff. We have very stringent environmental regulations in place, more stringent than usually what was required by the state or the city, um, making sure that people were taken care of. Like, this was one of those places that I think sometimes HR people couldn't stand because you couldn't fire nobody at Hallmark Cards, and we didn't even need a union. You know why we didn't need a union? Because people were paid well. People were paid well, people were treated well. Um, and if you wanted to fire somebody, honey, they had to commit one of the seven deadlies. They had to grab somebody by the booty, they had to get into a fight, they had to steal some money. Like, you wasn't just, if somebody was not performing, you were expected to coach and develop. You were expected to improve their performance. And it changed, just not even changed, it crafted how I saw leadership. It really did. And so anyway, I wanted to say today that empathy cannot sit on a bed of hypocrisy. And Don Hall Sr. demonstrated what it looks like to walk the talk and do what you say you believe and live your values every day. And he made a whole lot of money doing it. And so on November 5th, my hope is that we vote with empathy, that we act like there is enough, that we have a, instead of a scarcity mindset, that we have a growth mindset, that we understand what we can, what we can do to make this world a better place. And Don Hall Sr. has demonstrated what that looks like. Yvette, it was a fabulous place to work. Now, what I won't tell you is that I never ran into a bad manager. I did. Every once in a while, I ran into a bad manager, but they would not be supported. They would absolutely not be supported. When I think about people saying in 2020 that, oh, people care about diversity now, when I got to Hallmark Cards, honey, everyone was talking to diversity and inclusion. In fact, there were 4 plants. There were 4 manufacturing plants, one in Kansas City, one in Leavenworth, one in Lawrence, and one in Topeka. 3 of those 4 plant managers were Black men when I got there, or shortly after I left. There were only like 9 corporate officers One of them was a black man named Ray Powers. I mean, listen, just a pure bulldog, but he cared about people, and I believe that that was because of the leadership of Don Hall Sr. I really do, and it's what here's what's interesting. I feel like I need to be texting Don and I need to be texting Sarah to share my condolences. But this morning I've been resisting the urge. I've been resisting the urge all week because I know they're getting inundated. This is like national news. One last story. One last story. I went to Dorothy Heights. It was her birthday party. She was like turning 95, I think, and Don Hall was sitting next to me on on a Southwest flight. And I was like, Don Hall Jr. I was like, where's your jet, bruh? Like, why you in here with us? You know what I'm saying? And he was like, oh, somebody had to use it. I remember when this man named Keith, his son had gotten cancer, and he was a senior leader. They got him on their own jet so that Keith could go see his son right away. This is because of the father that Don and Dave had in Don Hall Sr. And when I got to the National Council of Negro Women, I'm sitting there at the table with Don Hall Jr. Listen, Hillary Clinton is there. Um, People like Bill Cosby are there. It's like all of the who's who in DC, right? All of the who's who in DC. I'm sitting there, Don Hall Jr. right next to me. We just talking. Ain't nobody know who he is. Turns out he's a co-chair for Dorothy Height for this event. He goes up on the stage, he says what he has to say. And then he couldn't eat his food anymore once people knew who he was. And I just think it's amazing to be to have amassed that kind of wealth, to be able to think about how you can make a contribution because of what God has done for you. And also to just be a really decent human in the process. I don't know what their political affiliation is. I imagine it's probably uh, on the Republican side of things just because of how much money they got. I don't know. I really don't know. But what I can tell you is this: we had political action committees that were Democratic in nature inside our organizations because they understood that they couldn't just force people to do whatever, you know? And I don't know. I now that I'm out running my own firm and I get to see lots of different organizations, I can go back and say that the leadership development and training that I got is because of the life and the beautiful perspective of Don Hall Sr. And so I just wanted to dedicate this Filter Free Friday to him, and I hope his soul rests in peace. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Y'all have a good rest of y'all. Good rest of y'all week.